I had first heard about blueprints around the time the Nintendo Switch 2 was revealed. Apparently, the journalist Jason Schreier talked it up to many of his fellow journalists at an early review event, which then trickled its way down to the myriad of podcasts I listened to. After the game released, the conversations increased exponentially. Those who were hot on blueprints loved it. Those who were not as hot found it vile. But among those conversations were numerous comparisons that piqued my interest. I did like The Witness. I do love Outer Wilds. And I've been fond of a good roguelite every now and then. And this was reportedly an amalgamation of them all. How could I resist? Blueprints was the long-term passion project of lead developer Tonda Ross. His journey through this Azure manor began in 2016, but his journey with puzzles has encompassed his whole life. Ross's inspiration were many, spanning films, video games, and the more physical mediums of books and tabletop games. Long before the concept of blueprints, Ross's adoration for the board game Jewels in the Attic had him hosting annual puzzle game design gatherings. Then, the documentary indie game The Moby introduced him to the idea that anyone could be a developer. Afterwards, titles like Riven, Gone Home, and The Witness became the push to finally jump into Unity. However, the preceding 9 years mainly drew inspiration from the card and board games Ross loved. From the puzzle book Maze, to the picture book Masquerade, to the trading card game Magic the Gathering, Ross gathered elements from each and integrated them into his own game's design. He even reached out to Maze's author to assist with one of Blueprints' puzzles. The first 5 years of development had Ross learning Unity and building the game in tandem. His story is a premier example of modern development tools. The earliest version of the game, the build that was good enough to inspire Ross to quit his day job, consisted solely of assets purchased through the Unity store, and it only took him 6 months to get there. Going from novice to functioning prototype in that short a timeline is impressive. After this initial build, Ross reached out to others to fill in the gaps of his own skill set. He teamed up with Davide Pellino from DocuBomb to design the game's hand-drawn aesthetics, and brought in the musician duo Trig and Gusset for the soundtrack. Blueprints was in a mostly playable state around 2020, leading to the last 4 years of development being for fine-tuning, balancing puzzles, making sure each solution had plenty of onboarding paths, and watching over 2,000 hours of QA footage to assure every player was able to receive the intended experience. By the time Ross started seeking out publisher Raw Fury, Blueprints was already near completion, and in April 2025, officially under the once film studio, now game studio DocuBomb, Blueprints released to quite high praise. Blueprints opens with a monologue by Herbert S. Sinclair, Baron of the mysterious Mount Holly estate. He has just passed and is reading his last will and testament. In said document, he has declared his grandnephew, Simon Jones, his sole heir, under one condition. Simon must reach the fabled room 46 of the estate within the year to claim this inheritance. But the mysteries extend far past the 46th room. During Simon's quest, he learns about his granduncle, his mother, and the tumultuous past of his home country. Is any of that interesting? Getting through the estate is simultaneously the core conceit of the narrative and the main gameplay verb. As Simon enters the manor at the start of each day, he has 3 options. Enter the door on the left, enter the door in the middle, enter the door on the right. The catch being, upon selecting one of the doors, he then chooses what room is on the other side. His options are limited to a selection of 3 random rooms from his draft pool. The selectable rooms are then dependent on a number of different factors. Rooms have certain rarities, and certain rooms can only be drafted under certain circumstances. For instance, a doorway cannot open up to the outside of the manor, or a certain room can only show up on one side of the building. Rooms are then also dependent on resources. Occasionally a door will be locked, a key must be used to unlock it before the room can be drafted, and drafting some of the more valuable rooms cost gems. Speaking of gems, they and an assortment of other items can be spread throughout the various rooms. Of the spendable currencies, there are keys, gems, coins, and dice. Coins can be used to purchase goods, and dice are able to re-roll the room selection while drafting. The non-currency items are designed to help Simon explore. For instance, the shovel can dig up dirt spots, the magnifying glass can zoom in on documents. Finally, consuming food grants additional steps to explore the manor with. The manor itself is a 5x9 grid. Each room, regardless of dimensions, takes up exactly one spot on said grid. Different types of rooms are differentiated by their color, and all, or rather most, rooms have some mechanic paired with them. Blue rooms run the gamut from giving a single gem to having a dartboard puzzle to being a literal library. Bedrooms usually involve steps, yellow rooms, shops. Red rooms are all paired with a negative trait. For instance, the chapel always takes a coin away, the archive obscures one of the selectable rooms while drafting. Speaking of doors, door placement is another of the game's catches. Some rooms have no further ways through, and are such called dead ends. Other rooms can have up to 3 additional doorways forward, but they won't always be viable. Rooms with the most doors either cost the most gems, or have the harshest penalties. And even then, if a doorway leads to a spot on the grid where a room has already been drafted, that doorway cannot open to a new room. It'll either be blocked off, or connected to the other room's doorway, presuming there is one. Stepping through the threshold of each room then reduces Simon's step counter by 1. When the counter reaches 0, he must call it a day. Or if there's nothing left to do on a current run, it's likely time to call it a day manually. Doing so wipes the slate clean. Not only does the entire floor plan reset, but Simon is not allowed to keep any of the items he found either. And that is how, mechanically, Simon interacts with Mount Holly Estate. But while exploring the building is the first main gameplay verb, the second is, well, reading, and sometimes math. Upon entering the entrance hall, Simon is accosted by documents. On the table, front and center, is a letter from Herbert S. Sinclair himself. A tutorial note is on a table off to the side. A note card can be found in the bedroom, game instructions in the parlor, a red note in the hallway, a blue one in security. The combination of this deluge of documents and the room-specific mechanics form all the puzzles in the estate. Some, like the instructions found in the parlor room, are straightforward. Other times, room mechanics are only explained by a document found in a completely different room, and certain rooms are sometimes able to physically affect one another, with an early example being the circuit breaker room, which can turn on and off power for a number of others. Then, by reading more and more, the documents hint at clues. Clues on other ways to interact with the same set of rooms, clues on where to find even more rooms, clues at where to find additional clues. Blueprints is a game about reading words and transforming them, and sometimes doing math, to find the next group of words. The puzzles in Blueprints are on another level. Absolute top-tier game design. Whenever I started piecing things together, it felt amazing. Even if the reward wound up being more puzzles, I still feel rewarded, because in the end, I am here to solve, not so much for what the game considers rewards. Not every puzzle fit my wheelhouse. Anything with letters clashed against my psyche. Taking a set of characters and recombining them to form a different word or phrase did not sit well. My mind can't handle them. The gallery specifically was especially vile. I literally charted out every combination and still couldn't figure it out. Others were just a little too esoteric. The vagueness behind their clues just a tad too much to have figured it out on my own, by myself. Even after I tracked down the hints or, in late game, extremely tough cases, tracked down solutions, I still was able to look back at the puzzle as a whole and think to myself, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's a darn good puzzle. The game is also a joy to look at. The basic art style, textured by bold, hand-drawn lines, really worked. I loved the pencil-like sketches used to define all the surfaces. It felt like the drawings in a blueprint come to life. Although, whenever the game cut to a 3D character model, it lost that charm. Those weren't great. While I didn't find any of the music especially catchy, and what was in the game was deployed quite sparingly, it was utilized exceedingly well. Whenever a track started, it added the perfect ambiance to this large estate. each song properly signifying the dark undertones of Simon's whole venture. And I guess the jingle that plays at the start of each day has been permanently etched into my mind. I don't know if that's more catchy or more that I heard it over 100 times, but it is still a good song. So, the package looks and sounds nice, and the puzzles themselves are impeccably designed. Then why is one of the biggest feelings I associate with blueprints a sharp, stabbing annoyance? One of the touch points I had heard used so many times to recommend blueprints was Outer Wilds. As an Outer Wilds superfan, this of course intrigued me, but I ultimately believe that pushing this comparison point was a mistake. My biggest gripe with this comparison with blueprints as a whole is the game design heavily relies on RNG, or random number generator. In essence, the randomness when things occur in the game. Outer Wilds, looking past the slight variability in regards to places like Brittle Hallow, nothing is random. Every time I set out into this solar system, every celestial body is exactly the same. The only difference is my knowledge and how to interact with them. In blueprints, the knowledge gained is still a major factor. Knowing how to interact with a specific room is paramount to solving each puzzle, and once I've gained that knowledge, there is nothing later down the line that will substantially alter it. But gaining access to these rooms is left to complete happenstance. It feels good. No, it feels great. Discovering the pool, then discovering the pump room, and divining that I need to use it to drain the water from an earlier discovery. It feels horrible, realizing 2 runs later, after finally, randomly getting to the right room to get back to that early discovery, that I lowered the water level too low. That now I have to keep rolling the die in the hopes that I can get to the pool again, so that I can keep rolling the die in the hopes that I can get to the pump room again and try to find the correct solution. Oh, but this run I ran out of keys. Oh, but this run I ran out of steps. Oh, but this run was just cruel and gave me dead end after dead end. Don't get me wrong though, just because I wasn't able to complete one particular goal doesn't mean no progress was being made. Maybe one of the dead ends was discovering a new room, or maybe I found a clue about a painting puzzle and spent a large part of the run beginning to decode that. Heck, this particular case I finally made it to the antechamber for the first time, which was maddening both in getting there and in what I found there. Spoiler, it's more puzzle. There are usually enough secrets to make discovering something new a regular occurrence during early runs. It doesn't become frustrating until I want to dig deeper into one of these discoveries. The water-based puzzle was only one example. Basically, every major puzzle requires some amount of luck to even attempt. Sometimes the game feels like I'm cruising through room after room being exactly what I want. Other times I spend literally hours trying to get 2 specific rooms during a single day, and no amount of puzzle-solving stimulation can ease over the frustration that comes with the latter experience. And this is all on top of the comparison not even being accurate. As I stated, Blueprints is a game about reading words. Reading, interpreting, and combining words, sometimes with math. Of course, there are some systems involved, but they are few and far between. Outer Wilds is a system-based game. It's about understanding exactly how the disparate physics of each element work to be able to get to the next clue. You can't get to the one thing if you don't understand how the jellyfish work. You can't get to that other thing if you don't understand how the anglerfish work. You can't get around to either of those places if you don't understand how the sand works. Both types of puzzles are fully valid, and as I expressed earlier, Blueprints' puzzles are great, but they are so different in terms of design that comparing them is altogether useless. It's like saying Mario Sunshine is like Splatoon. Yeah, you jump and spray liquid in both, but the design and verbs and mechanics are so different. What comparison are you even trying to make? Sloppy analogies lead to faulty expectations, which can only result in disappointment when they're not lived up to. Hey, don't compare the manta ray fights. That's cheapening the point I'm trying to make. What are you doing? Also, I didn't care for the backstory. I didn't care for the narrative. I didn't care for the faux world history. As a reason to be in this mansion, it did its job. But as a through line, I really couldn't care less about this rich white kid or his family. Shortly after I reached room 46, I knew the bulk of the story. Or at least I had become very familiar with the big events leading up to Simon arriving in the first place, but I was never moved by it. Even when I went back through and analyzed every piece of Orindia history, a process that became necessary due to a later puzzle, I did this research because it would help me progress, not because any of it sparked interest. But again, the puzzles were really fun to solve. I don't care why any of the countries have sigils, the process of divining them was incredibly rewarding. Much of the history was focused on the manor itself, focused on when it was built, by whom, and most importantly, how it functions. And the latter's explanations took me out of it. Numerous documents are spread throughout detailing people's frustrations with Mount Holly. The new gardener has trouble getting to some of the plots, the new scientist spends a week without a lab, a guest doesn't even get to see the host, but I found scant documentation explaining why it functions like that. On the podcast Side Story, one of the hosts, Austin Walker, mentioned how he read that the continent Eurasia has house magic, which was the game's way of explaining this phenomenon. I found no such clause. What I did find were computers and cameras analogous to our world's technology from the 90s. I found a history of trains and dirigibles and old-fashioned automobiles. I found a late-game note explicitly stating a fortune teller was not magical, and I was able to extend my suspension of disbelief to explain away paintings being moved, items resetting, or walls opening up by pulling the right lever. But I really wish the game made it more apparent that, in some cases, magic does just exist. I can accept a world with semi-modern tech and also magic, but believing in a clockwork mansion built 100 years prior while the current modern computers still look like they run MS-DOS was a struggle. Speaking of a struggle, I needlessly put myself through quite a big one while completing this video game. And I say needless because the game outright tells the player, you can stop now, multiple times. I was able to count 5 distinct moments where the game lets the player off the hook. 1. Reaching room 46 rolls credits. Not many things signify an ending more than credits, but by that point there were still so many dangling threads, so many more puzzles, so many more achievements. This is an easy endpoint to rush past. 2. Cleaning up all the achievements gone on a single file. At least for me, my last was for completing the aforementioned sigil puzzle, but wouldn't you believe it, there are still more threads to pull, so many more puzzles. 3. After getting a room and performing a very specific sequence, a cutscene plays that puts a pretty good cap on the story, and where this cutscene could feel final, it also clearly unlocks a new upgrade, and if there's a new upgrade, there's a new puzzle. 4. But don't you worry, there is a literal, definitive, the end, after reaching the end of that puzzle and finding what I'll only allude to as a new book. This was the point where I unshackled myself and started looking things up, and would you dare not believe it, there was one more puzzle. 5. Finally, after solving this final stretch, and by proxy having solved every major puzzle in the game, is the final time it told me to stop playing. on that save file, at least. It is wild how many times Blueprints tried to tell me this, begged me to see the frustration festering within, pleading me to stop glaring at my TV, to stop angrily starting new day after new day, but I didn't listen. I kept going and going, and because I am the person that I am, I even forced myself to track down the last remaining upgrade disc, which I guess should be considered a 6th off-ramp. But don't worry, there's yet one more off-ramp, 7, the remaining new game-related trophies. 4 more trophies are rewarded for reaching Room 46 in Curse Mode, Challenge Mode, on day 1, and in under an hour, respectively. And I stand here before you today to plead one thing. Do not do this, especially if you, like me, found the procedural game design frustrating, because these last 4 achievements are exclusively fighting against said RNG. Dare mode was the breeziest of the batch, but a bad seed of dares can lead to a truly impossible time, including this one run where I lost before even starting. The rule was to not pick up the blueprints, and okay, that one's actually funny enough, it gets a pass. But you gotta look out, because others are, don't use an elevator. That can get really tricky. That's also one that I had. Curse mode sucked, especially if you accidentally, glitch the game, making the curse magically turn off, which then makes getting the trophy impossible to achieve on that save file, resulting in 6 hours of gameplay being lost. And the day 1 and under an hour trophies made me so mad. I was literally screaming at my television. Day 1 requires so many things to go just right. A way to get downstairs on this side, a way to get downstairs on that side, and a way to get into the antechamber, all with enough steps, enough keys, and enough gems. Oh shoot, I only got to rank 2. Oh shoot, I ran out of keys. Oh shoot, I didn't get into the antechamber. Oh shoot, I set up literally everything perfectly, but ran out of steps. Again! Ugh! Even just thinking about it again is making my blood boil. I was seething. I was losing sleep thinking about this stupid challenge. So don't tell anyone this, but I cheated. Link in the description to what I used. I needed to be free. I needed to be done. And this shiny trophy of trophies did not taste any less sweet. 109 hours, my 50th platinum trophy. Okay, sorry. I need to recenter myself. Need to think back to all the great times I had in my first couple dozen hours of playing. Think of the elation I received from filling up every spot in the manor for the first time, or finally managing to nail that dead-end challenge. That's not even to mention how good it felt to solve this game's plethora of puzzles. How I slowly gained knowledge of this place, mastering which rooms would be best for which spot. How I learned to navigate these truly complex corridors. These were some of the best puzzles I've ever had the pleasure to figure through. But by golly, the procedural nature will always be such a thorn in those experiences. Overall, I give Blueprints a secret garden key out of 10. Once you learn how to use it, it is probably the best item in the game, but when you desperately need it, it's never found. With a shout out to the basement key, you're telling me once you get something, there's just more puzzles after? Hell yeah. Thank you so much for watching. Have you played Blueprints? What are your thoughts? If not, what are some of your favorite puzzle games throughout the years? I've started hankering for a replay of Obra Dinn. Hey, while you're here, maybe subscribe or rate the video if you'd like to, or follow me on my socials. I'm at Mario8 everywhere. Links to them and all the sources I used are in the description. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.